Why is it that in China you can get stuff delivered in an hour?
Cheap people. No, it's so this is the I keep going back to this. It's what is amazing about China. Yeah, and there's a lot of amazing stuff. But one of the things was there's no said accepted way of doing something. There's none of the structures that are in place overseas. So, what we have in Australia is people start businesses and they go, oh, but we have a delivery company. DHL can do delivery. In China, you have JD, who starts as an e-commerce company. He started with 10 shops in Beijing. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to do all the logistics. There's no DHL or anyone. There's no UPS. I'm just going to go out and build. He took $1 billion from SoftBank in '07 or something and built out logistics in 20 cities in China. And so they've just pushed each other to really deliver at that speed. And obviously, of course, it's also you have much cheaper manpower, so you can do those deliveries. But they just haven't sat down in their head and said, oh, well, this is the way it's always been done, so we have to do it this way. They came in and said, well, why can't we do it that way? And started figuring it out. And Baozun is amazing. Baozun, for example, when I started, like I said, the warehouse was in a meeting room like this. The guy who set up all their, Peter, the guy who set up all their logistics was this guy who didn't even graduate high school, was in South Africa for a couple of years working, came back, started out at Baozun sort of sweeping, and had this incredibly mind where he started setting up all these warehouses. And within 4 years, he went to visit the Nike warehouses in Amsterdam, and he's like, we're not that far behind them. Mm-hmm. So they go out and they just keep improving it, and there's no real restriction on saying, well, I don't have that knowledge, so I can't set it up. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. They just sort of keep trying. The other thing is fine. We see all these really successful businesses. There's 100 that tried to do the same thing and failed, and we don't see those. Yeah. So that's one of the things. I think logistics will get really interesting as they get out AI and as they start building out that, because even as manpower costs go up, they'll start swapping to technology to do it. So simple one, Cainiao, which is the Alibaba logistics network, they just came out with their 2020 plan. So they don't do 2030 plans, they do their 2020 plan of they want to reduce distances traveled by all their couriers by 30% using AI to figure out the best routes and to map the best routes for them. So it saves manpower costs, it's great on the environment because it saves 30% of all those costs, and helps deliveries get even faster because they're mapping it all out. So they're really using technology in a much better way to start doing all these deliveries.
Yeah. Which leads me, I mean, this is a more general observation, but it seems to me that, the Americans got left behind in payments because they're still sending checks out. And, China's really the first market in the world that's gone pretty much all the way. What about in logistics? Do you think there's a chance in logistics that Chinese will conquer the problems of logistics much earlier than Western markets, including Australia?
So there's a couple of things to that. Now I just put my sort of Communist Party hat on.
All right.
But China jumped ahead in payments, and you can stop me if you disagree, but because the banks and Visa card and all these have government capture.
Yeah.
So they will come in and put every kind of regulation in place to help the consumer and to protect the consumer, to prevent new companies coming in. China, the flip side, the government, from what I understood, the government was like, our banks are horrible. They're not particularly innovative. Alibaba, go figure this out. And so the Hangzhou government actually gave them a lot of support and a lot of air cover at the beginning. So it helped them jump through. They don't have that very simple thing. And we never think about this in Australia or in the West. We pay a 3% tax on every purchase that goes to Visa. We never think about it because we never see it. That's a 3% tax on everything that we purchase because we're using the Visa rails. In China, it's 0.02% or something that you pay to Alibaba. That's a tax that's just sucked out of the economy and given to Visa for very little reason. There's no reason that it has to be that high, but we don't think about that at all. The Chinese government actually thinks about that and putting that in place. I think the same thing will happen in logistics. I just don't... the Chinese government has every interest in forcing that kind of innovation on these companies. Those companies themselves are incredibly competitive, and so they're fighting amongst each other. In the US, you have who in logistics, UPS and Amazon. UPS will get, and DHL. UPS and DHL will get beaten down by Amazon. Then Amazon has no interest in continuing to innovate as fast. They will because it's Jeff Bezos, but they don't have as much of an interest to innovate in that. Whereas in China, there's always that competition that's driving that innovation. So I think in logistics, there's no question. I just think the only restriction on that is other countries being fearful of China and not wanting to give off their logistics to China, which is
Right.
a fair question.
Yeah.
But that's a geopolitical question,
Sure.
not an innovation kind of question.
Sure.